Welcome to the Social Chameleon Show, where it's our goal to help you learn, grow, and transform into the person you want to become. Today, we're honored to introduce Alan Quintel, a renowned Feldenkrais method trainer known for his clear, creative, and practical teaching style. Trained by Dr. Feldenkrais himself, Alan has developed numerous transformative programs, including Pregnant Pause for expectant mothers. He is the author of Creating Creativity, Embodying the Creative Process, and Practice Intentional Acts of Kindness and Like Yourself More. In his latest book, Practice Intentional Acts of Kindness and Like Yourself More, Alan guides readers to emphasize kindness in our daily lives, breaking old patterns and expressing more love and kindness. Join us as we delve into Alan's journey and discover how his work enhances physical function, expands self-image, and fosters creativity and connection. Alan directs Feldenkrais professional training programs worldwide and continues to inspire and educate from his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This was a great interview. I learned so much. Alan was great. I hope you guys really enjoyed this interview. Without further ado, let's welcome Alan. Alan, welcome to the Social Chameleon Show. I've been looking forward to this. You've got some interesting things, a couple of interesting books. I'd love to be having a chance to dig into all these different things.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. When I was digging into your background, I noticed that it seems like a back injury changed your entire life. Could we talk about how that?
Yeah, it actually did, and it led me to something I never could have imagined. I was an actor. I hurt my back doing sit-ups, and I got better. And then I was wallpapering my acting teacher's bathroom, which is how I made a living as an actor. And I hurt my back, and he said, "Go see this Feldenkrais practitioner." And I went, "No." And I read one of his Feldenkrais's books, and the thinking was interesting, but the movements made no sense to me at all. So I went to a chiropractor, and he popped me and actually made me worse.
Oh no!
And, well, but that I'm not against chiropractors or anything. It's just that's
Sure.
what happened. So I went to this Feldenkrais guy, and this is in New York City, and I was in my New York pace like this, and he was moving like this. And he started touching me, and he was barely touching me. And I thought, oh, this is such a waste. It was expensive, but this is such a waste of money. And I got up at the end, and I had no pain. And I said to him, "What did you do?" And he said, "You did it." And I said, "No, really, what'd you do?" And he said, "Really, I was helping your body do what it's doing." And I thought, oh, it's a secret, huh? And about 3 days later, I was driving on a road in New York called the FDR Drive, still no pain. And I noticed I wasn't getting angry when people cut me off. And I thought, what happened to me? And all I could think of was this Feldenkrais lesson. And I went back to him 2 more times. And after the 3rd time, I thought, this is really interesting stuff. I wonder if I could do this part-time and pursue acting. And Feldenkrais was giving his final training, it turned out, and I managed to get into it. And I spent the next 4 years studying it. And then within a year and a half, I had a waiting list, and I kind of put acting aside. I still work with acting schools and actors and stuff, but it really changed my life. And it's taken me all over the world now and written books and everything. It's all came out of that. But here's the kicker, okay? I don't tell this story very often, but the college I went to was the college at Purchase, a state university in New York. And I auditioned 3 years in a row to the acting school there before I got in. First year I didn't get in, my best friend did. The next year I got waitlisted. The 3rd year I got in. And my friend who was at the school, he called me and said that just the first 10 letters of acceptance just went out and your name wasn't in it. And I was like, oh no. And the next day I got an acceptance letter. And I called him up and I said, "Ricky," I said, I got in, I got the letter. And he went, "Well, I hope it wasn't a mistake." And that kind of colored everything for me.
Oh.
So, but anyway, I went to that school. It was that acting teacher who turned me on to Feldenkrais. And then maybe 20 years ago, at that point, I was friends with my acting teacher. And he said to me, "You know that letter that got sent out?" I said, "What letter?" He said, "The one that accepted you to Purchase." I said, "Yeah." He said, "It was a mistake."
Oh.
Yeah. And I said, What are you talking about?" He said, "No one knows how you got that letter."
Wow.
He said, and of course, it wasn't a mistake. But then I realized if I hadn't gone to that acting class, I never would have found out about Feldenkrais. I never would have written my books. So, but it was like finding out I was adopted. It was like my whole life was based on this mistake. And of course, since then, I wonder what other mistakes happened in my life, you know? So.
That's interesting. I mean, you could frame it as it's a mistake, or you can frame it as maybe it's serendipitous. Maybe this
definitely.
was meant to be.
Definitely.
How did you, was acting like your dream?
Yeah, I think
How did
so.
you deal with all that rejection from a school that seemed like you really wanted to go to?
Well, I have a lot of perseverance, obviously.
You're a New Yorker.
Yeah, originally, yeah. And the rejection, I mean, look, if you're not kind of thick-skinned, acting isn't the profession for you, because it's not just the university rejecting you. You get rejected all the time when you're auditioning and things, and you don't have a clue why, really, you know. So you got to be tough with that and just keep going, you know. But then again, as I said, once I started doing Feldenkrais, it became really successful. I kind of went, this is a lot more secure, and I like it. You know?
Right.
And so, yeah.
What was there? Is it your upbringing? Is it maybe a New York state of mind? Was there self-talk? Like, how did you, back whenever this was, maybe in the 80s or 70s, when there wasn't really a lot of this kind of stuff around, how did you have that fortitude, that sense of, rejection's okay? Seems like maybe some of that has phased out of society now. How did you think about that when you were young?
The rejection about acting and stuff?
Oh, right. I mean, everything. Yeah.
Well, as we were talking before we started, my aunt was an actress.
Right.
And so it was something that was allowable, a reasonable thing to do. And she was a successful actress too. So it was like when I wanted to be an actor, my parents didn't say no. I mean, they still wanted me to be a doctor and all this other stuff.
Right.
But they were able to tolerate it a lot more. And at that point, the acting school I went to was one of the most reputable ones. So that was a chance to acknowledge something that I got into that. But, it's funny because I just wrote a thing for a website. And one of the questions they asked me about, like social media interaction. And one of I named 3 things, but the first one was perseverance, because it's not fun doing that stuff. It's not fun auditioning and going out, but you need to kind of stay with it. And I would put it in another way that's more important, which is really, I talk about it in one of my books too, which is to be able to differentiate our feelings from our actions. To be able to say, I don't feel like auditioning. I don't feel like doing this. And I do it. And it's not the just do it of ignoring myself. It's saying I can have these feelings. And people who exercise or meditate, practice an instrument, they do it all the time. They have to do it, because in order to run every day or meditate or practice a musical instrument, you have to stay with it consistently, regardless of how you feel. And if I'm lying in bed in the morning before I meditate, and if I have the thought, should I meditate? Boom, I'm back to sleep.
Right.
It's like, get out of bed, and I do it. And I find once I'm doing whatever it is I'm practicing or doing, it's easy. All those kind of injunctions to tell me to stop, they go away pretty fast.
Yeah, I fight that every morning when I'm staring at my ice bath and I'm looking at it. I'm like, what am I doing? Well, my brain's like, listen, buddy, you did it yesterday. You don't really do it today.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just get in a little bit. And then I get in like within seconds. I'm like, what was I complaining about?
Yeah.
Every single day. But like you're saying, right? I train myself every day. I'm going to get in this bad boy, and I know I'm going to feel better. I know. Right. So even if the only benefit I get is I did something super hard today, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it's I wonder where it feels like we've somehow pushed this out of society a little bit, and feelings are the most important thing. And I hear that from so much. I hear it from my kids. I hear it from people around me, and I tell my kids a lot too. Like like my son's like, I don't want to get an ice bath, or I don't want to work out. I say, good, go do it.
Right.
Do you have an idea of maybe where that's gone, or how we've kind of got away from that?
You mean how we kind of align ourselves more with our feelings than our desires, or more?
Right. And then that leads to not doing the hard things. That leads to not doing the things that we should be doing. And then also maybe tangentially is we lack the discipline.
That's right. Well, the discipline comes from practice. And, I think practice in anything is, in my book on kindness, it says practice intentional acts of kindness, right? It's about practicing something. We only get good at something is to practice something, to do it consistently. And as I said before, the idea of not letting our feelings dictate what we want to do. And this can be really confusing because I let my feelings dictate what I need to do and what I want to do. But in that last sentence, I just said what I want to do.
Mhm.
And that's where the clarity of what do I want to do, which is not an easy thing to know what we want. We can know it on an immediate sense. I know I want to go out and get Chinese food. Okay,
Sure.
that's easy to do. But in terms of what do I want my life to look like? How do I want to mold it? That's too big a question for most of us. Years ago in New York, in my private practice, I had a client who, she was kind of mopey, and she came in one day and she was like, listen, I got 3 new jobs. And I looked at her, I said, what happened to you? And she said, I did the Firewalk, Fear into Power, with Tony Robbins. This is a long time
Yes.
ago, right? And she changed so dramatically, I thought, I'm going to try it. I figured I could even deduct it probably,
Right.
So I went to this Firewalk with Tony Robbins, and it's basically like a 5-hour trance induction. And at the end, you walk through about 15 or 20 feet of hot coals, and people would get through it and go, yahoo, I could do whatever I want, fear into power. And I walked through it, and I went, I could do whatever I want. And then I thought, well, what do I want to do? And I got depressed and got into a cab and went
Oh,
home.
wow.
So this idea of if you want something bad enough, and one quote I found that is kind of credited to Thomas Jefferson, but then as I researched it, they said it's not sure, which is if you want something you've never had before, you have to do something you've never done before.
Absolutely.
And that kind of really speaks to the perseverance, the tolerating the challenging or difficult feelings and saying, this is worth it. And so often in our lives, there's more of a sense of obligation to doing things than the real desire of, I really want to do this. How do I make this happen? So
I do agree with that. I feel like there is a big sense of obligation, and I feel like as a parent, I try so hard to not. I don't tell my kids like what you want to play football, you want to be a ballerina, you want to go to college, you don't. That's cool. I try not to break any pressure on it because I don't want to color their things with what I want them to do or what I think they should do or my unfulfilled dreams or my unfulfilled desires or whatever it is. But there's a lot of that, especially I personally see it a lot in immigrants to the country and stuff like that or whatever. There's a lot of pressure. You need to be, a tech something. You need to be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse. Depending on the culture, there seems to be one of those types of things you need to be. And that's got to be heavy on children, especially.
And it's different in different cultures, but like I've worked a bunch in Taiwan and Japan, and it's strong there. Right. It's strong in European culture. It's a little more relaxed mostly because education is paid for and everything, and people can make their own decisions and stuff. But I haven't been to a culture that isn't like that. That we're not, and the parents who are or the culture that's pushing people, it's not like a bad thing. It's that's the way things were structured. And I wonder, as per our conversation, how much of that kind of forcing young people to do things came out of hoping to teach them some sense of perseverance and continuity. I have lots of friends with little kids, young adults and stuff, and I'm impressed with most of them how there's a sense of direction that the kid is going to follow. And then it's the parents supporting it that's the most important thing. But then I could say the same thing about ourselves. What's our sense of direction? How do I support myself in the endeavor that I want to accomplish?
Yeah, I just think the only thing I fear is when we seem to be forcing, especially children or something like you need to be a doctor, you need to do this. And I hear a lot. I grew up in Hawaii, so they had a very diverse culture there. And a lot of times I heard from friends and acquaintances of, I have to do this. My family's depending on me. I need to send money back home. I need to do these things. And they're miserable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be a nurse. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to do this. And they're absolutely miserable. Yeah. And I hear what you're saying. There, I definitely think there's good intentions there, and maybe there's something back of our brain from before where we were like, listen, we got to do this. We got to get the village together. We got to keep the farm going. But that seems to have gone to the wayside a bit.
But the farm going, I mean, that's something that was literally true, right? I mean, you had to, water the crops or plant things. You had a very fixed time frame to do something. So you couldn't give in to the feeling of I don't want to do it today. That wasn't even an opportunity at that point, I think.
Right.
So
yeah. And then you see that whether it still exists in our culture, those people are like, listen, I got to do hard things today. That's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Versus and when you get towards more like the maybe city type culture, it's like, I don't have to do anything today. I don't have to leave my couch. Everything will be brought to me and to man.
Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was 17, I was an actor, and I had dropped out of college. I went back again, but I was doing this children's play, and I came home one afternoon after doing a performance, and my mother says, "We want to talk to you." And I said, "What?" And she said, "We've decided you're going to be a doctor." And I went, "Oh, that's very nice, Mom." And she kept pushing. She was really pushing. And I said to my dad, I said, "Tell her to stop." And he went, "She's right." And that really blew my mind because he never colluded that kind of stuff. And for about 2 months, she called me Doc. It was very sweet though, but it was always with the best of intentions. But the people you talk about who have done it and are miserable in their lives because of it. And that's a tough thing.
Yeah, I personally seen it quite a bit. Like I said, growing up in Hawaii, there's a big culture of immigrants, first generation Americans, and things like that. So I did see a lot of that. But circling back around to how kind of we got there, not having a clear idea of what you want to do. Do you have ways of clarifying that, or maybe thinking about it, or starting down, like identifying what do I want to do, so therefore you can go pursue?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things that pop into my head right away, and I'm going to flip them around because I think the second one is more important, and that's being patient with ourselves. Being patient with ourselves, and then continually asking the question, what do I want to do, right? I was in a talk once, and they were talking about like a mission in life, right? And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, I've always been successful in my work, and I could say, well, that's kind of my mission. But when I think like, what's my mission? What am I here for? Which is even beyond what do I want to do, And it was very funny because whenever I would kind of think about it, this thought would come up into the background, which was help people like themselves more. And my response to that every time was, yeah, I do that already. That's not it. That's not it.
Right.
And then one day it dawned on me that that's my mission. My mission is to help people, and I do it through different means and stuff. And it was kind of such a simple answer. I overlooked it. And so sometimes the answers are really simple because the wants that we have are so attached to big outcomes, or big successes, right? Like a book, like a podcast. Like, don't we want things to go viral? Because we live in a world where what counts is 1 million hits. And I was thinking about this, and one day during COVID, I had some colleagues who were doing a lot of stuff online, and I did some, and honestly, I didn't care for it. I didn't care for teaching online like that. But other people were saying, you've got this great mailing list and you can make all this money. I said, it doesn't really get me. It's not what I want to do, And I kept coming back to this, well, what do I want to do? What do I want to make happen in my life? And as I went further with it, I realized that, like my teacher, Dr. Feldenkrais, this is back in the early 80s, he talked about being on Telstar. Now it's a joke. Telstar was a satellite that could broadcast to millions of people. Oh. Well, we can all do that today, right. And he kind of embedded it in our thinking about how big something needs to be. And then as I reflected on it more, I started thinking, how many people does someone really get to influence in a lifetime? And I actually Googled it, and it's 10,000, 20, there's different numbers and stuff. But when I look at the amount of people I've been fortunate enough to influence, it's tens of thousands. And it's like, can I be satisfied with that? I mean, isn't that enough? So when we look at the want, what do we want to do? I think we also have to be careful that it's not fame. It's not afford you money, fame, all that's great, but it's like, how much money do you need? Right. And I know people who are really rich. I mean, really, they never have. For generations, there's no concern for money, and they're worried about money. And it's kind of like, this is a bad use of your energy. It doesn't serve you in terms of creating something that's satisfying to you, that's satisfying in a way that your response is, I like myself more for doing this. So yeah, but that want is a really tricky question, and I have the same question now. Like when I finished the last book, I really wanted to write that book. I was very clear about that, and I made it happen. And now I was just talking to a friend the other day, like, I don't know what I want to do next. I like the things I'm doing, but what do I really want to do next that's beyond what I'm already successful at or doing? But I don't have an answer. I mean, I have ideas about other books and stuff, but I don't really have the answer yet. So,
is it okay just to be happy with just doing what you're doing, and that's that?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a question in that too. So I read a book. Someone gave me a book a few years ago, and it's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about 4 zones. It's a zone of incompetence, the zone of competence, the zone of excellence, and the zone of genius. It's about being a genius. And I read the book and I went, oh my God, it so resonated with me in terms of where I had been living for decades, where that I spent most of my time in the zone of competence and the zone of excellence. I'm good at what I do. I'm successful at it. Everything works well. I have plenty of work. But that zone of genius is like, I have to push myself more. And my book on kindness, that had been in the works for a long time, but that book made me finish it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, it was like, oh, we need to push ourselves sometimes. So living a life that's satisfactory is satisfactory. I would never judge that or say anyone's wrong for that. And certainly, like, I don't have children, but certainly people I know with families, their family is the source of that satisfaction, which is just brilliant, and I don't feel a lack because of it, not having kids, but I see how much it affords them to not have the same drive to do so. And I have friends with families who are very driven, so it goes both ways. But yeah, if we're happy with ourselves, we can let that be. But if there's a feeling of, I thought there was more to life, then there's a dissatisfaction, and it can be an inkling of dissatisfaction. Maybe that's worth paying attention to,
I feel like that circles back to how we kind of started the conversation, where you're getting with your feelings again, like, oh, I feel fine, and then you're not pushing yourself to that uncomfortable place again.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder somehow that you maybe every once in a while we have to constantly re-examine that. Like, am I not pushing myself anymore? Am I okay just feeling okay?
Right. And that's a really hard one to answer, even the idea, even like, because if people hear you and me say, you need to push yourself to be a little uncomfortable, it's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's to do that? So, and the funny thing is, it's like, what do we mean by uncomfortable? Like, I ask people all the time, when do you decide to get comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what the most dominant answer is? When I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a crazy criteria. That means I don't get comfortable until I'm uncomfortable. Like, you're sitting in a chair for how long before your neck hurts enough for you to change your position in some way, right? Now, we can flip that around. I can check in with myself, and all of this, the want, all of this has to do with reflecting within ourselves more and more to see if we can find our answer, what we want, right? Like, I overlooked my mission for a long time because it just, yeah, I do, that's fine, pushed it aside. And the idea of saying, if I'm comfortable, can I be even more comfortable?
Mm.
Can I keep it? And now we're talking about being embodied. This is how children function in the world. They regulate themselves entirely by their state of comfort. Their wants are very clear. They want to play with that thing. No, you can't. But I want now, right? Or you'd see a child drawing and playing on the floor with crayons, and they're sitting this way, and they're sitting that way, and they're moving around. You never hear the kids stand up and go, "Oh, mommy, my hip hurts," because they're regulating themselves that way, and we've lost some of that. And so some of it is just getting back in touch with ourselves to find out sensorially, well, how am I? What am I doing? And seeing if that opens the door to tolerating discomfort without it being injurious to ourselves. Because in my work, in the Feldenkrais method, the first approximation for everyone is to learn to get more comfortable, right? To feel more connected with themselves, to feel that I can more easily fulfill my intention, right? Or differentiate my actions and feelings, all of that. But then at some point, the challenge of life means that it's not going to be so easy. So what do I have the means, the wherewithal to push through it, right? And to push through it without ignoring my feelings, but to go, I'm going to keep doing it, and not pushing through it, like I said, and ending up hurting myself, right? But saying, I'm going to be clear about this. I'm going to keep going no matter what for the moment. Yeah.
It feels like that hedonic adaptation in a way. We slowly get comfortable. You know, my hips are a little tighter, my neck's a little, so I round a little bit more. And day after year after year, you're like, you're walking around or you're sitting thing or something's not quite right, but you don't even notice it anymore.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But then it comes back to the question, like, look, I know that my posture has changed over the years, right? And I'm not that tall to begin with. I'm sure I lost a little height too. Okay, I can live with that. But I only really notice it when I see a video or a picture of myself and I go, oh, that guy looks older than I feel, right? But then it comes back to one other thing too, which is regardless of that, can I do what I want to do? Like I can fall to the floor and stand up with no problem at all. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend of mine once, and I was saying, look, for me, falling, I can fall really easily. He said, falling's not the problem, it's getting up. And that's true. I mean, that's been studied, that kind of thing. The ability of someone to go down to the floor and get up is significant in terms of maintaining health and well-being. But, you know, it became, so what we're talking about here to me is a little bit like, what's the question that I want to ask myself that can lead me forward, right? Am I comfortable enough? Yeah. Okay. So what might make my life better, right? What would the things be to improve on the quality of my life? And the first response to that usually is something external. I buy a new TV or a car, I get a new relationship, a haircut, whatever. And all of that, that's worthwhile and worth considering. And it has its it's a resource for us in a lot of ways. But my question is, how can I generate this feeling internally within myself and not have it dependent on some external object? Which means, God forbid, I lost my house, I lost my car, I lost my job. Who am I? Right? What do I want to be in this world? And you know, you see some people who don't recover from their traumas. Not to minimize anyone's trauma or anything. You know, as a great example of this, do you remember Christopher Reeves? He played the
oh yes, Superman.
Superman, yeah. And he was in I think a horseback riding accident, broke his neck, became a severe quadriplegic, and then he was interviewed on Barbara Walters' TV show back then. And I remember watching him. This guy was like a shining light. He wasn't bitching and complaining about anything. He was like going forward with his life. And I actually wrote to him and I sent him all of Dr. Feldenkrais's book saying, you're a testament to what it means to be healthy. And in healthy, Feldenkrais had an interesting definition of health. He can determine how healthy someone is by how quickly they recover from an accident or a trauma. So that means our life finds meaning and moves forward again. And like when I teach in hospitals and stuff, and they bring me people who need help, and there's always two people, and often one of them is some old guy who had a stroke, and I said, well, what do you want to do? And he goes, I don't care.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's because they give up, because their identity is so tied with their job or things like that.
Material things.
Outside things, as opposed to saying, how do I learn to like myself with what I'm doing and push myself too? I can tell you in terms of pushing ourselves. So in the book on kindness and liking ourselves more, I can say with some certainty that all the things that I write about, I can do. I feel like I've accomplished those things, right? But then, can I read you a quote from the book?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is actually, I love this quote. It's from Ram Dass. And he says, when you go out into the woods and you look at trees, you see all these different trees, and some of them are bent. And you sort of understand that it didn't get enough light, so it just turned that way. And you don't get all emotional about it. You just allow it. The minute you get near humans, you lose all that. And you're constantly saying, you're to this and I'm to this. The judgment mind comes in. And so I practice turning people into trees, which means appreciating them just the way they are. And the reason I'm reading that to you is because when I think of the next step right now for me to be kinder is to be less and less judgmental. And I don't know anyone who's not judgmental. It's a question of degree, of course. But then, I travel a lot, and, so often in airports, I find myself seeing somebody and I'm making up a story, positive or negative, it doesn't matter. And now, if I can catch that moment, I just look at them and I go, tree, but the reason I'm bringing that up in terms of challenge is because for me, I don't know if I'll get to that place where I won't say not judgmental, but almost not judgmental in my lifetime. So each accomplishment we arrive at whether it's playing an instrument or liking ourselves or anything, the next step gets further away, and that's a challenge too, right? So, and again, it comes back to the idea, do I have the means to sustain myself, to persevere regardless of that, So it's, one thing I can say about this that kind of quieted my mind a little bit is that if I'm able to spend less time in judgment, I'm starting to succeed. That it's not that I don't judge anymore, but I don't keep talking to myself about that in the same way. I think that's an improvement.
Yeah, I like to do something similar. I guess a good example is like when you're in traffic or something, or somebody cuts you off, and it's like, I don't know what's going on with this guy. Just go, buddy. Right. You want to get in front of me? Go right ahead.
Yeah.
And you're in traffic. I'm like, I just get to listen to the rest of this podcast. I just get to finish my book, and it is a lot better state to live in. It's not constantly, trying to, oh, I'm going to get you. I'm not letting you in. It's like, why are you? Right. What are you doing to yourself? And then I think back, if I do have that thought, I'm like, something's gone in your life that's made you so stressed, so whatever. Right. I was like, I'm not even going to entertain whatever I think you're thinking. So
right. But that's the attitude we need. And driving's like a perfect example, because that can just I know it can set me off. And it's kind of like, oh, if I could just, rah, and then I laugh, just go, here I go. Okay, stop it, see what goes on. So it's, but these are all the challenges we all face. It's not unique to anyone that I know of.
Right. Speaking of your book, and so in your book, you talk about intentional kindness is framed as a deliberate and thoughtful action rather than random or spontaneous.
Yeah.
Can we unpack that a little bit? Like, I personally, I love random acts of kindness.
Oh yeah, me too.
Even I prefer to be spontaneous. One thing I absolutely despise is when the calendar tells me it's a certain holiday, I'm like, not participating.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation, but
Sure.
but the idea, and I too, I love random acts of kindness. I remember that bumper sticker, practice random acts of kindness. I had that in my car for years, and that's something that we embrace, I think is a good way of looking at it. But then intentional acts of kindness goes back to that idea that we were talking about before about practicing something.
Mm.
How do I practice a random act? A random act happens randomly.
Mm.
You don't know when it's going to happen or when it's going to happen again. Whereas an intentional act of kindness, of whatever it is, that's something that we need the tools to sustain it so that more random acts of kindness show up.
Okay.
So it's not that I have to be consciously intentional in everything I do, but I want to practice it enough to be able to go, oh yeah, oh, I can do that, you know? And they come up in the moment. It's not like I'm planning to give a bigger tip to somebody or something. Like I was just taking a taxi in France and we got to the end. And in France, you don't tip the taxi drivers,
Sure.
but I gave him some, it was like, oh, and you know what I've learned to do is if I have the thought that I'm going to like tip that amount,
Mhm.
I pause and I probably give 50% more.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Just to go, that pushes myself. It's not like pushing myself like meditating every day or something, but it's like I'm going to go outside of my comfort zone in terms of doing that. In the book I talk about generosity, and in one of the each chapter has exercises for people to do. And in the one on generosity, I talk about tipping. And so I suggest, if you give whatever amount you give $1. For every $5 you give $1 more, if you can afford it. It's always
Sure.
within your means, right? So if you give a $5 tip, give 6. If you give 10, give 12. If you give 20, give 24, right? And I'm literally writing this chapter of the book, and I go out to dinner with some friends, and I pick up a check. It's a little local place, and it's about $70. And I thought, well, I'd normally give 20%, that's 85. And I had $100 bill, and I thought, I'm going to give the whole $100. And in the next moment, I just clutched. Like
Ah,
my stomach grabbed, and I was like, what are you doing? You can't do that. That's crazy. Blah, blah, blah. And I was shocked at my response, because here I'm writing about this. And it's like, where you got to show up, man. And you know what I did? I left the $100. But the coolest thing is the waitress stopped me as I was going out and said, you just made my night.
oh, amazing.
And I thought, but that was random. I mean, it was
Mhm.
connected to something intentional that I was writing about, but I was also shocked at how hard it was. So the challenge exists in unexpected places, I would say.
Did you think about or come to a conclusion on why you felt that way?
Yeah, because of my habits, the way I was brought up and what I was told, that's too much. And you're not allowed to do that. And you're wasting your money. And they're going to think they're going to take advantage of you. And next time you come in, they're going to expect it again. There's a million conversations that can happen that tell me why not to do something. I think we all probably have dozens and dozens of conversations why not to do something. And the question is, are they true? Right? Do I need to live by them? Right? It's like, or can I step out of that habitual way of being me, which defines me too, right? Will my friends think I'm foolish for tipping so much? And actually, I think the friends I was with, they did think I was foolish because they would never give 20%,
Mm.
right? They were
Interesting.
15 percenters, so it's like, that's just crazy. But it's like, I look at that as an example that I can set for other people. I have in my training program, so they're like often a month-long segment. And I began this years ago. I bring like at the end of each week, it can be a bunch of cakes, pastries or bagels and schmears and stuff like that. And when I would work in other people's programs and do that, the educational director would sometimes get annoyed with me.
Interesting.
Most of the students and other teachers, they're like, wow, this is so cool. It's so nice that you do this. And I said, why are you annoyed? And they said, because now I have to do it. because they felt, well, if that teacher does it, I'm supposed to do it too. And they didn't buy into that. And I said, you don't have to do anything.
Right.
But your discomfort around it shows me that some part of you thinks maybe you should. No, why don't you find out? You know? But I said, don't do it in your own program. Do it when you're visiting another training. So you're not obligated for 4 years now to do that with someone, you know?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Is it maybe a guilt thing?
Can be, yeah, sure. Can be. You know, I think it can show up as guilt, or just the strong values that we don't even know that we have.
The subconscious programming that we've had.
For generations.
Right.
You know,
Right.
there's a story about a woman who, every time she makes a big roast of meat, she cuts it in half and puts it in 2 pans. And one day,
Oh, yeah, I know this story.
oh,
Continue.
yeah,
Continue.
yeah. So
Continue for those that don't know.
yeah. So one day, her husband says to her, "Well, why do you always cut it in 2 pans?" And she says, "Yeah, I don't know, Mom. That's how my mother did it. That's how I learned to do it." So she calls up her mother and says, "Mom, you know, when we make a roast, we cut it in half, put it in 2 pans. Why do we do that?" And she said, "You remember that? Oh, that's so sweet." She said, "When you were little, we didn't have enough money to buy a big pan. So we cut the roast in half and put." Now you listen to that story and you think, how many generations did that go back when we do something like that?
Yeah.
And that's one way of describing what a culture is. A culture is the repetition of values that goes on and on and on and just gets repeated without being questioned at any point. You know, like when I was growing up, everyone was worried about TV was going to destroy our minds.
Right.
Well, we're way past that now. You know? TV seems benign compared to some of the concerns that people have between phones and AI and stuff like that. So it's but it's something that still perpetuates. And what's perpetuated now is the concern that novelty and change will be bad for us.
Oh, interesting.
You know, I like AI freaks me out a little bit.
I love it.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Look, I was in Belgium working with a friend, and he's really into AI, and he said, let's try it out. So he goes, AI, can you tell me something about Alan Questel? And it gives this really nice bio back of all the work on the things I've done. And he says, and I understand he's written a book. And he says, yeah, he wrote a book called Creating Creativity, Embodying the Creative Process. And it talks about that. And then he says, I understand he wrote another book. And AI comes back with, yes, he did. It's called Expect the Unexpected, with the whole description of it. But I never wrote that book.
Right.
And that was like, freaked me out. That was like, oh my God. And then he said again, wasn't it another book? And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, it was a book on kindness, you know. But I mean, that's the world we live in. It's not, we can't close it down. It's kind of like, okay, how do we get smarter because of it?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of interesting things there. I like to, maybe it's just the rebel in me or something. I don't like to do other things people do without knowing why. And I don't know if it was inherited through my son or because he sees me do it. I see a stop sign in the middle of nowhere, I'm not stopping. I was like, this is pointless. I don't do it. The red light, there's nobody around. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I don't care. What is the point of this? I don't do it. Right. Just because somebody told me to do it or just because everybody else does it, I don't do those things. Yeah. I'm sure there's things somewhere where I haven't examined, but I try to examine those things a lot. And my son does it too.
Well, I don't know. Learning from you, yeah.
Probably. But when he was littler, he's like, Dad, why aren't you following the rules? I said, the rules don't make sense. I don't care what it tells me. So, but you can't park there. It says, who, why? This makes no sense. There's nothing around. I don't care what that sign tells me.
Right.
And I think he got older. I think maybe started understanding. Anyhow, we're at dinner with my mother and my grandmother, and he's wearing a hat. He goes inside, and he's wearing his hat sitting at the table. My mom and my grandma's like, take the hat off. And he's like, why? He's like, because you take hats off inside. And he's like, explain to me what is the reason I have to take my hat off for. And they're like, that's what you do. And then my mom and my grandma look at me like, what is wrong with you? Why does he have his hat on? And why are you allowing him to speak to us this way? Yeah. I said, can you articulate to him why? I said, why do we have to take a hat off? I don't know. I personally don't care. So I was like, you know what? Let's figure out, why do you take your hat off indoors?
Right.
it goes back to like the 1300s
Yeah,
when
yeah,
we
yeah.
wore a suit of armor. You would pull up your lid on your thing so people could see who you were.
Right, right,
Why are we still taking off our hats?
right, right.
Nobody has a clue.
That's right. That's true. That's true. And that's a great story. And it's like the thing, like when you say the stop sign or a red light, my internal sensory response was kind of like I held my breath for a moment.
I seen you. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, huh? You do that? Wow. Oh, okay. You know?
I
Now,
run a stop sign every day.
okay.
Multiple
And
times.
how many tickets have you gotten?
0.
Okay. So you will keep doing it until you
Yes.
get a ticket.
No, I've been pulled over one time.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It was a weird situation. It was in Hawaii. The military base was just shut down, and it was a great like shortcut to someplace else.
Uh-huh.
And it's just desolate roads. You can see all directions, all around, and it's dark, completely pitch black. So you can absolutely see anything and everything that's going on. And I just go up, and I just take a left, and I just keep on going. The military officer pulled me over.
Yeah.
Said, "What's wrong with you running stop signs?" So what is wrong with you? You have no jurisdiction here. But that was the only time I got in trouble. I've never been in trouble. Now, if I see a police officer, I will stop. I will stop for a second there. But
the problem is when we don't see it. You know, so
Right.
I teach in Taiwan. In Taiwan and Taipei, the street lights are organized to keep traffic going.
Mhm.
You could be standing in a corner for 98 seconds.
Wow.
You watch it counting down, and it's like this consensual agreement. Everyone does it. No one, and if I dare to cross the street, I get the dirty looks like your grandma, you know, grandmother with a kid. And it's like, I agree with you 100%. But then the different cultures have different rules. Like many years ago when I was in Poland, when I was an actor and I was working there, and I was warned, don't cross in the middle of the street. Go to the corner where the light is. You will get arrested.
Wow.
And people will report you.
Wow.
So there, you followed those rules. We're like driving in Italy. I found out driving in Italy, there are 2 rules. The first rule is if there's an empty space, you fill it in. And the second rule, there's no rules. One way, you can go 2 ways. Who cares? You know, they just do whatever they want, you know?
Oh, wow.
And it's kind of a funny thing to come from a more restricted culture to go into one that's more casual like that. Or the reverse, if you go from a casual structure into a restricted one, wow, that's really hard. But you know what? The thing I like about what you're talking about the most is it's a deeper investigation of what do I think? What do I believe? What do I want to do? Right? So I create my own values about something, and I live a life that's mine, not someone else's idea. Right.
There's a phrase I really like. It's the world is only the way it is because somebody changed the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think, well, I don't like the way it is. So I'm gonna change the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of people don't like that.
Sure.
I've gotten in so much trouble in my life. I think my son has picked up some of that. He gets in trouble in school.
Right.
The dean called me the other day and he was talking about some things. And I told the dean, I said, if you can't explain to him why you want him to do something and you don't like that he asks you why he needs to do it, I said, you should examine why you're telling him that.
That's right.
And he was just quiet. And I was like, exactly. You don't even understand what you're saying to him.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think about things. Some people think I'm wrong. Hey, that's fine. You can.
I don't think you're wrong at all. I think, and again, it's a question of attitude too. It's not like the world is wrong. It's like, I want to think about these things. What makes me do what I do? You know, why do I make a choice? That maybe it's more about that than anything else. You know, my work in the Feldenkrais method, one of the basic tenets, because it's all done through movement. So we're not teaching the right way to move. We're creating more choice in how you move. So depending on the context you're in, who you're with, how you feel that day, where you're going, what happened before, what's going to happen afterwards, you might choose to act one way or act another way. And that's something that, again, if we come back to our culture, cultures tell us how to behave so that, and I don't want to get into the whole political thing here, but so that the culture controls us then, you know? I think the strongest examples of that in recent times that I've been to is Japan. Japan is a beautiful culture, but man, it is like held in. It's like if you go outside the box there, it's a big struggle. It's really
Yeah.
hard.
I have, like I said, growing up in Hawaii, I have a lot of Japanese friends, parents. Yeah, that is tough to stray outside of or bring shame upon.
Right.
And shame it's a subjective term.
Oh, it's a terrible term.
I have a friend. He's just spent so much of his life like thinking he shamed his parents, and his mom was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like,
"Oh, interesting." Huh.
And not that all of it wasn't true, but he really built it up to be quite a large story and feeling. It's very interesting. I'd like to ask, what we're talking about these kindness and all these different things. What makes people not accept kindness?
Oh, they don't feel worthy.
I
felt that in times in my life. I think it's people who, you can see this in many people who are very generous, have a very hard time receiving.
I do. I don't want anything back.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, it's a gift to someone to receive something from them. But that's hard to move around, I mean, I've always been, I think, because of my own self-study about it, but when I was younger, my gifts that I gave people were too big. And I remember giving, and they become so overwhelmed, and it's like, I like that. Now, why am I doing it? Yeah, I want to give them a nice gift, or am I doing it as if I'm saying something about myself, how good a person I am, or something like that? And once, many years ago, 3 of my friends got together, and as a birthday gift, they bought me no one will know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to say it, a hi-fi stereo VCR.
Oh,
right?
I know what you're talking about. I'm still old enough. I do remember those hi-fi VCRs. Yes.
Right. So this was
like 150 to
it was like $300.
Oh, wow.
Expensive.
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded. I wanted to not accept it because why? Because I didn't feel worthy of it. And I'd learned, here's another thing about practice. So to practice liking myself in a context like that, I have to stay with the uncomfortable feelings and accept it graciously, happily even, to be able to say, oh yeah, okay, they thought that much of me to do something like that. But don't we do the reverse all the time? Someone gives you a crummy little gift and you think, that's all you're giving me? Right? We don't have a problem, with that, but when it's too big, it's representative in some way of who we are. And I think that lack of self-worth, that I'm not good, I don't deserve this, I'm not good enough, I think that's so prevalent in every culture, and it's a sad thing, but it's like, so how do we get beyond that? So I can't go around saying I'm worthy. What does that mean? I mean, where's the humility in that too? But I can discover, are the ways that I can like myself more. And if I can find ways to like myself, then my self-worth moves up. I just had a conversation with someone about the difference between self-worth and entitlement. Well, an entitlement to me is something that I feel I'm owed it by others. Right. And self-worth is just the feeling I live within myself. Right.
Yeah. I have a problem with the word like deserve too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because it implies something that we're owed something in some way, and no, but look, it's the tone of voice. I can say to someone, I can give someone something and look them in the eye and say, you really deserve this.
Right.
But that's me telling them they deserve it. That's not them saying, I deserve more. I deserve to be paid more. I deserve blah, blah, blah.
I deserve Ferraris. I deserve mansions. I deserve Rolexes. Why? Because born, that drives me nuts.
Yeah, sure. And then you get those things, and then you just want more things because they don't satisfy it after a while. It's a real thing like this. So maybe you've had this happen. If you've ever owned a new car, so you drive around in your new car and you look at all the same car all the year, and you just kind of, oh, I got the newest one, and they're looking at you, and then the year goes by, and all of a sudden the next model comes out. And now you're looking at the guy in the new model going, oh, I wish I had that. That's crazy. It's a 1-year-old car. It's perfect,
Right.
It's so yeah.
I know
forth.
the current car I have now was the first new car I ever bought. And I told my wife, I was like, man, I've never bought a new car.
Yeah.
And it was great. But I don't have that other part of the feeling, but when what they call a mid-model refresh. So usually about 3 to 5 years as a car has been out, it's called a mid-model refresh. And they just kind of refresh a couple of things. And I was like, I kind of want that new version.
Right. Yeah.
And it lasted for a little bit. And I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
But yes, we all have that, something, some whatever 8 part of our brain that wants a newer thing that we don't need.
It's the comparing part of our brain. And what what's a great example of that? Did you ever see the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy?
I don't think so.
So it's an old film, and it's about this. It takes place in sub-Saharan Africa in a completely barren region where this tribe, I don't know, has 30, 50 people in it or something. And this little plane flies over, and the pilot throws out a Coke bottle. Of course, someone finds it in the tribe, and they've never seen a Coke bottle. And this becomes like a whistle. It becomes a kind of tool that they use for things. They can roll out some flower things with it, but there's only one. And all of a sudden, there's contention within this harmonious community. And they all are fighting for it. They want it. And it's kind of like, if you don't have anything, you don't want for anything,
Right.
And these days with the internet, where you see everything that you don't have, and it's pushed in our faces continually, that we compare ourselves to others. And again, this is back to that external sense of satisfaction, which is valuable but momentary. So it's not I wouldn't exclude it or say it's bad or wrong, but it's like, why do I need a new car? Like, I just got a new car last year. My other car was 13 years old, and I only got a new car because I started burning a lot of oil. It was fine, but I'll tell you, now that I have the new car, I'm really happy.
Yeah, my car is a 2014, and my transmission went out. Crazy,
Yeah.
Never happened in my life. And I fixed it, and everybody was like, "That's stupid." I was like, "But
Yeah.
why?"
Yeah,
My car is in perfect condition. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong with it. I bought this thing brand new, and then I thought about it. I talked to my wife about it. I was like, I said, "What's the new car payment now?" I looked it up. I think the average is like 700 something. So $800 a month. I was like, in a couple of months, this is paid off, and
Right.
the car is still paid off. I was
Right.
like, we don't need another expense.
Sure.
If there was something maybe wrong or it was beat up, I might have considered it. But I was like, my car's in perfect condition. Didn't need it.
Yeah.
But so many people are like, "You're stupid," and I was like, I'm not in debt, so I don't know
Right.
who's. I
It
don't
was-
need
right,
I don't need
yeah.
a car.
Right.
Yeah, such interesting things. This conversation reminded me of something I saw on your website, and you posed the question: would you like to like yourself more?
Yeah.
Can we unpack that?
Oh, yeah. So I ask this question in every context I teach. So I start talking about a workshop I created around self-image, and I started to think self-image is a reflection of how much we like ourselves or don't like ourselves. If I have good self-image, I like myself. If not, I don't like myself. And then after a while, I started to think it's my job, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, and I'll say, oh, I need to stop here. Is there anyone here who doesn't want to like themselves more?
Hmm.
And almost always I get this kind of sheepish kind of smile like that. Because of course, one woman once said, I already like myself. I said, that's great, but that's not the question. The question is, would you like to like yourself more? And she went like, okay, and I asked that question, that do you want to like yourself more? Because I haven't met someone yet who doesn't want to like themselves more.
Yeah, I'm really pondering that right now. Like, do I want to like myself more?
Well, what value would you have? You have a higher degree of satisfaction. It relates to what you want, right? And look, there are many times, I hope, in all of our lives where there's a quiet plateau that we're sitting on, where we go, life has been pretty good to me. I feel fortunate. I've had these successes. Yeah, we all have failures and stuff, but I'm in a place where not bad. I could stay here for a while. But does that it's like the book I was talking about. I'm in the zone of competence and excellence, which is good, but it's it was lacking something, you know? And I knew that if I wrote my book, I'd like myself more, right?
Okay.
And I felt
Yeah.
that if doing that hopefully was an act of kindness to others, if it was worthwhile in any way, um, the hang on, I lost my thread for a minute. The the idea of liking ourselves more, we can look at it in different ways. We can say, can I be a better person? What does that mean? Right? What gives me satisfaction in life? And again, not to minimize money, but if it's only about money, it's like at some point you're gonna look and go, "Oh, what am I doing with all this? How much is enough, or what do I do?" And the feeling that accompanies the process of liking ourselves more, and as I said before, the general way that we approach it is external, right? Which is, again, it has its value, and it has a lifespan to it, I would say, different lengths of lifespan for different things. Um, my interest is in helping people generate it internally, so they're not dependent on the outside world to like themselves more. And
Absolutely.
and one way I talk about this in the book, but it came out of my work teaching the Feldenkrais method. So there's two modalities to it. One of them is group classes that I guide people through very gentle movement sequences, and they affect changes in breathing, posture, range of motion, self-image. I work with all kinds of people, and the movements are done very small and very slow so that your attention can wander through the rest of yourself. And I came up with this question, and I ask people the question. So notice what your response is to my question. As you're doing these gentle movements, are you moving in a way that you like the way it feels? And if the answer is yes, that's great. But if the answer is no, that's significant.
Mm.
That means you're probably trying to achieve something or do it right or correctly, or you're comparing yourself to others. But if your focus is on, do I like the way it feels? And of course, this is a context that's outside of our everyday context. Who cares if you do it or not, right? No one's going to know. It's not going to make any difference to the people around you other than how you feel about yourself. And, when I train people, it's a 4-year training program. And one of my programs in Australia, at the end, when I hand out the certificate and give them a hug, so many people whispered in my ear, I like myself more now. Right? But then we go back to what I said before. For me to like myself more, it's a bigger hurdle each time, right? It doesn't get easier, but it's easier to keep going because of the previous successes, you know. So I think the question of would you like to like yourself more is an important one to consider. Because if someone says no, you know what it also can speak to, and I have to be careful saying something like this because everything that we're talking about, I think, is evidence of someone who's somewhat reflective in nature. But I know lots of people who are not reflective.
I think it's hard. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it can be for sure. Yeah, right. And they say, "I'm fine. I don't need that." Okay, that's not someone I'm going to pursue it with. At what point might you pursue it? Right. Like I have one friend, and he's probably one of the most impatient people I've ever known. And I mean, like in the middle of a conversation, he just walks away. It's like, "Whoa, where'd you go?" And one day he said to me, "Do you think I'm impatient?" Because his daughter had said something. And I said, "I actually think you're very impatient. You're not impatient. You're like really, really impatient." And that was the end of the conversation. He didn't ask me more. He didn't get more patient. He didn't. So there's an example. That's a good friend of mine, but it's someone who just doesn't, it's not a value that he cares about. His values are
Okay.
all externally generated,
Yeah.
right? And so if someone doesn't want that, then we're back to the want idea again. It's like, well, you could put the question another way. Like if I asked, someone, would you like to like yourself more? And they go, well, I like myself now. I said, so let me ask you a question. What would happen in your life to make you feel even better about yourself? And if you say a Ferrari, I'm going to stop and say, no, 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 that's an outside thing. What would change in your way of being in the world that you would imagine that you feel better about yourself? And that people ponder, they'll consider that for a while. They may not have an answer, you know. It's like when I work with someone who comes with different issues or something through movement, let's say, they've had a stroke or back pain or something. And of course, I know why they're there, right? But one question I always ask is, what would you like to be better at? And sometimes they're dumbfounded by that. Everything. I say, okay, what else?
Yeah.
But the difference is, if I have back pain, that's something I'm trying to get away from, which makes sense. No one wants back pain, right? But in order to get away from something, I actually attach myself to it, because then I'm always checking in. Where is it? Is it there?
You're constantly focusing on. You're just ruminating on.
That's right.
My back hurts. My back hurts. My back hurts.
Well, even when it's better, you're ruminating on it because.
Is it going to hurt? Am I going to hurt it?
Yeah, exactly. All of that. Right. Okay. Whereas if you think of what do you want to be better at, that's going towards something.
Mm-hmm. And you're putting yourself in the future you.
That's right. That's right. And that's a really different focus for attaining anything. If someone says to me, well, I'd like myself more if I lived in a bigger house. Well, that's just describing the satisfaction of their house, right? And I said, but that's the house you want to get away from. What do you want to go towards, So it's a different perspective that moves us in a different. Here's a good example of that. So when I started my private practice years ago in New York, I was successful very early on. I had a waiting list, and my uncle, who was a dentist, used to come to me for sessions. And I didn't charge him anything. It was my uncle, and he was a dentist. He had back pain. He thought he was doing me a favor. It's like, yeah, okay. So after every session, his back pain was gone. Next week, he'll be back again. And this went on 4 or 5 sessions. And then one session, I said to him, you like to play golf, don't you? And he went, oh, yeah. He loves golf. What would you like to improve in your golf? So we talked about that, and I worked with that, which was through movement that affected his lower back, and his back pain never came back. So you can see how the different perspective changes.
He was focusing on the wrong thing.
Well, no, wrong is even too strong a word, but it wasn't a useful thing.
The proper thing. He wasn't focusing on the proper thing.
Yeah. So he wasn't focusing on something that could take him out of his difficulties.
Because he was stuck in the moment where he was.
But that's what we were talking about before about self-image. That the culture tells me to stop at a stop sign. But why? Right? How do I do that? Right? And how many people live in pain as if, this is going to sound weird, as if they deserve it?
Oh, wow. That's a powerful thought.
That's a powerful thought, right?
Wow.
So on some level, people feel, and they're blaming themselves. So deserving can go both ways, right? I deserve a bigger car, or I deserve back pain. That's dark, I had a client, and this was someone who she'd been in a car accident, and she was seeing someone, and the insurance was paying for her sessions, and it ran out, and she didn't have a lot of money. And I said, I'll see you. And this person also had arthritis, and they came in that day with a lot of pain. And at the end, it was like, I have no pain. And I said, quite casually, well, maybe you don't need to have arthritis. And the next week, she came back and she was pissed at me. She said, you tried to make light of my condition. I have a serious condition. And I just said, okay, keep the arthritis. So you can see the kind of attachments we have to our self-image that grows in a certain way. And we're unconscious about it. We don't know that, right? And it's like, years ago when I started my Feldenkrais practice, I was teaching classes in my acting teacher studio. And I came in one day, and I'd hang out with him for a little bit before, and I was, how's it going? I don't know. I was kind of bummed out. And he said, "What's happening?" I said, "Oh, well, I got 3 new clients this week. I had a new class starting, another one starting." And he went, "Oh, you're being successful." And I got really angry. I got like, "Yoshi, come here." And I thought, why am I getting so angry? He's right. But it was uncomfortable to be successful because somewhere in my self-image, someone told me, I was telling myself, don't. You can't succeed, And like, how many injunctions do we all live with like that? That's tricky.
It reminds me of this phrase: "We we keep the limitations we fight for." Something along those lines.
That makes
And
sense.
after I learned that, I started listening and looking around. So many things we fight for. It's like you're fighting to continue down this path you don't like.
Right.
I'm like, stop it.
Right. In in my book about kindness, I start out with like a worksheet that I ask people to fill out, right? And I know from talking with many people that they assume they're going to start writing down all the places where they need to be kinder. But the question I ask is, let's write down all the places where you already are kind. Let's start from the foundation to build on that rather than making yourself wrong or lacking in some way in which you need to get, right? And say, I'm actually doing some of this already. So you kind of acknowledge that, oh, so it's possible. May not be at the scale you want, but it's possible like that, and that's again, it's a question of perspective of doing something. And we learn about, like you're saying, the attachments to ways of being that we didn't, I got really blocked. So I'm writing this book, it's over a number of years. And I get to the section about being kind to ourselves, and I got blocked for about 5 years.
Oh,
Yeah. Ooh, I was like, I thought I was kind to myself, but I'm not so sure. I think I have to understand this more.
And you said no. Yeah.
Yeah, my motivations for being kind to myself were not so clear. I think that they were more how others would see me. It wasn't really my own values. It didn't have their own values saying, I'm not going to stop at a stop sign, right? I mean, that's like a clear value. It's like, no, I have a reason for it. And but then, what that also does? I would imagine that when you're driving like that and you know that you're not going to stop, that you're paying more attention.
Oh, yes. Yes. You must analyze everything because you have to make a split decision. Do I actually need to stop today?
Right.
Is there a dog? Is there a car? Is there somebody else? Is there a police officer? You got to know.
That's right.
So I'm not doing the speed limit through.
Right.
I mean, sure, there could be a scenario where I know I can just do the speed limit through, but typically the stop sign I run every day, I have to slow and I look, okay, we're good.
But that's a demonstration of a better use of your attention. Because how many people stop at stop signs and don't pay any attention, whether they stop, I mean, they sort of slow down, bam, they hit, So,
there's a stop sign along my same drive out of my neighborhood. You come off the street and typically you make a right. And a lot of times cars are parked along the curb. People don't stop at that stop sign and they come around. Several times I've almost gotten into accidents. But because I know I can see them coming, and I know what majority of people do. They run that stop sign around the corner. I stop and wait there. This one time a big SUV came and he just stopped right in front of me, and he was mad at me.
Yeah,
I was like, you ran the stop sign, and he threw a drink out of his car and smashed into my. I was like, you're mad at me, like, and it's tough because it's not quite a 1-lane road. But a big car, a big SUV or truck, and a normal size vehicle, we can't pass next to each other. So if there's, one of us had to move. It's like if you waited at the stop sign, I could have gone, you could have gone. But they're very upset with me.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So many things. In your book, you say kindness is a skill that can be developed. The book emphasizes that this is an inherent quality within everyone. Maybe a 2-part question. Maybe not. Where does this go wrong? And what are the common ways that it does?
In the practice of kindness?
Right. Well, so you say this is an inherent quality.
Yeah.
It feels like somewhere along the line it goes wrong for people. Somehow you get jaded. Somehow you lose that ability. And,
Well,
or am I missing something?
what you're saying. Yeah. I think that the people, well, here's a tricky thing that sometimes, am I doing an act of kindness simply for the sake of the act of kindness? Or am I doing it because I expect something in return? And if there's an expectation of something in return that's not acknowledged in some way, then why would I keep doing it? Doesn't work. Waste of time, you know? So I think that then there's a misplaced, like generosity is a good example of this, right? So generosity is often equated with kindness,
Okay.
right? You say, though people say, oh, he's so kind, he's so generous, generous, so kind, right? But they're not the same thing. Like kindness is not giving something to someone.
Right. It's the opposite.
That's right.
Withholding.
Yeah, if you have a dinner and your alcoholic friend comes over and you don't give them, you withhold, you don't give, that's kind, don't give them the drink. It's not like giving is generous, so you always give something like that, you know.
Telling somebody an uncomfortable truth or something.
That's right, you know. And so I think that then it's a question of looking at our motivations for something, right? So why do we stop doing something? Because either we don't get the result of the actual action or the acknowledgement of the action, right? But if I'm doing it for either of those, you know, if I'm doing it for the acknowledgement of someone else, I think that's a misplaced motivation, right? And so it can go wrong there, right? And these are the things I talk about in the book, you know,
Right.
and that's where that again we have to evaluate what's generating my desire to do these things, right? Like the gifts I was talking about before. What generated my desire to give big gifts? I don't think it was about the other people, if I'm honest. I think it was about how I was going to be seen. You know,
The expectation of external validation.
that's right. Exactly that. You know, and even now, if I every week at a training give out, you know, all this food and everything, people like it and people genuinely thank me. But if they didn't thank me, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
You know? Now, that's not to say that I don't have those thoughts or feelings. So an example of that, there's a restaurant here in Santa Fe that I go to pretty frequently. And, you know, I said before I used to tip 20%. And now, even if the service is bad, I tip more.
Oh, okay.
But what I've done is I've called the server over and I say, I just want you to know I'm giving you a big tip tonight, and the service is way below par. Right? Everything came out in the wrong order. Things were cold. So I'm not going to punish you by not giving you a tip. I know you guys that's how you live, right? But I'm also telling you, you need to pay more attention to something like that. And I felt like I could do that because of that, right? But there's this one restaurant I go to all the time, and there are often different servers there. And I've never had any of them acknowledge, thanks for that tip. And at first, it kind of like, I went, what? Why do they say that? And then I went, Alan, why are you doing this? You know, this is your value of doing something, and it's not to get something back. But that's where the work is for all of us in doing something like that. It's like, oh, I need to get more clear. Either I got to stop doing that and go, that's not what I want to do, or, oh, this is why I want to do that, right? To know in me that I did that for me, not for someone else, you know? So I think when things go wrong, you know, it's like that's the next moment to go, oh, time to look at my values again. See what what do I think I'm doing and what am I getting from it? So
Yeah, it's an opportunity to use a kindness as a lesson.
yeah, sure. And look, like I told you about the first tipping story, right? Where I gave more, and it was like I clutched inside and it was like, well, this is kind of weird. I didn't know I felt that way. You know, I thought I had this great idea, quite magnanimous, generous. Oh, yeah. But then when push came to shove, I was like, what am I doing? you know? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And that's like, those are great moments for me, you know, where something like that happens, where I can go, huh, I thought I knew what I was doing, but I
Yeah.
didn't.
It's another level.
Yeah, it's another level. Yeah.
Speaking of barriers to kindness, like you talk about, the various obstacles, fear, judgment, negative past experiences, you know, and the different types of things you speak about in the book. What is, maybe for lack of a better question, is what's the simplest, maybe one of the faster, easier ways to start doing that now?
To be kinder?
Right, to overcome those barriers so you can become kinder.
Well, I think you can only overcome the barriers by acting in a kind way and then finding out what they are. You can't, I mean, you might know some of the barriers to begin with. Like you might have you were told as a kid, don't tip, don't do this, don't do that, and you start to take that on as a value. What happens if I do that, right? So, but most of the time it's going to happen when you act. And then it's only after the act that you discover, like what I was just talking about, I discover all the buried feelings and responses that I didn't expect. And it shakes me up inside. It's not a pleasant thing, but that's the means to, if I can get past those things, then I like myself better,
Mm-hmm.
And again, the first approximation is considering it, even like, do I want to make these changes? Is this something that seems worthwhile? It's like if I said to you, okay, I understand completely why and when you don't stop at a stop sign,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then if your son's in the car, what value is he learning? Well, on one hand, he's learning to think for himself, and you give a really good explanation, but that can go off too.
Sure.
That's where it's like, oh, I created the circumstances whereby he can think for himself, but is he able to weigh all the components necessary to make that decision? But that's any child growing up is facing that, because they all get ideas and do cuckoo things,
Mm-hmm.
So that's, it's one of the things that I don't know if it fits in exactly with what you're asking, but it came to my mind, which is many people who, if you tell them they're generous, they go, no, I'm not generous.
Mm.
Right? But then there are people who think they're generous, and I don't think they're generous at all.
Oh, interesting.
So, it can flip to both sides of what's generosity. Is it something that someone else thinks about us, or do we think about ourselves? How do we measure it? What's the reason why that someone does that? When I was an actor in New York, I had a contracting business, right? That's how I started out telling that story. And I did pretty well with it, but you know who were the worst ones to work for? I apologize to anyone out there who falls into this category. You may be the exception. Really, really rich people.
I've heard that.
They would fight me for every nickel and dime and argue with things and try to get money taken off. And I'm thinking, my God, I mean, like, what's that about? I don't know what that's about, but it was a real shock for me to see the values that, and, then people say, well, that's why they're rich. And I go, you know what? That's not why people are rich. That's just stingy. Don't confuse the two things.
Yeah. Because there's very generous rich people and there's very stingy poor people.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there a quick win that we could do if we are fighting these barriers? Is there some like baby step or something? Somebody's like, I've been thinking about this. You guys, this conversation's got me thinking, I am not kind, or I'm not kind enough, or I'm not kind, whatever their thought is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there an entry level?
Yeah. There's always an entry level, and it's going to be different for different people. Okay. So I can't predict ahead of time.
Sure.
But I would say that the entry level has to be something that you can easily do on a daily basis, something small. Because when we think of, I'm going to learn to be kind, that's too broad. How do I succeed at that? I'm going to learn to like myself more. Wow, good luck. I mean, that's just like, that's setting ourselves up for failure when we do something like that. Sometimes I work with people with very strong habits about, let's say, I'm supervising someone in their private practice, or I'm pointing something out to someone about how they do something. And I say, so, and they're very interested in it. And I said, so how long do you think it'll take to change that? And sometimes they say 2 to 3 weeks, and I laugh. I say, I just laugh at you when you say that, because I don't think it's realistic. You've been practicing yourself this way for a lifetime. Now you think in 2 weeks you're going to change it? I said, I think a year and a half to 2 years is a reasonable amount of time. And then they go, what? So much time? Blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, think about it. In 3 weeks, if it hasn't changed, you feel like a failure and you forget about it. You're not even going to bother, right? But if in 6 months you haven't achieved it yet, you go, I got a year and a half to go. And in a year, it's a little better, but I got another year to go. And so it needs to be in approximations, and the approximations need to be where there's an appreciation for little successes. So here's an example of that, and I write about this. So when I was 19, I moved out of my family's house, and I decided at 19 that I wasn't good at anything. When I was 19, I wasn't old enough to be good at anything, and I decided I was going to learn to be good at one thing. And this is all intuitive. I was very fortunate. I decided, I knew I didn't brush my teeth well. So I thought, I'm going to teach myself to brush my teeth well. Now, the good thing about that is it's something I did twice a day, if I did it, right? And then who would know about it? Nobody. No, the dentist, but he knew already, right? So no big deal. So I picked something that I had to do every day that I could use as a kind of barometer for how I'm doing. Now, the funny thing about that was what came up, which I did not expect, were all the sabotaging strategies that I had around myself.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know. I just didn't know that I was living like that. But this one innocuous little thing was enough for me to go, wow, I'm learning a lot about myself here, And so it can be turning the lights out in the house, folding your laundry, washing the dishes, something on a daily basis that takes care of yourself and for someone else. Make someone coffee in the morning, right? I mean, do something that can happen in a regular, small way. That's the doorway in, I think. That's the only doorway in. Anything bigger than that is just a recipe for failure when we do something like that.
Sounds similar to like New Year's resolutions and different things like that, where you just take on so many things you can't do anything.
Right. That's a great example. A New Year's resolution of these promises we're going to make, and they don't work. Right. I know someone who they call themselves an alcoholic, right? And they made a decision based on an external event to stop drinking, which is already a little dangerous. But if it starts them, it's good.
Sure.
And they just wrote me that they haven't drank for 30 days.
Oh, amazing.
And you know what they wrote? And it's really hard. And I wrote, 30 days? What do you expect? 30 days? You're not even at the beginning yet. You haven't even got to the line where you start yet. It's going to be really hard and continue to be. And that's why they say something like one day at a time, right? Because if you think past that, you feel overwhelmed, And so New Year's resolutions, they're always a strange thing to me, because you say this thing and then within a month you have another thing to feel bad about yourself. What's happening with your resolution? Screw you. I don't want to talk about it,
Yes, definitely something I don't participate in, because I used to get in trouble in school. Like, you need to write this down. I was like, this is the dumbest. Why don't I start today? Why do I have to wait for the first?
Yeah.
It makes zero sense to me at all. This topic reminds me of a book I recently read by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but he talks about this concept. He's like, if you when you look at somebody's work or you look at something, you're like, oh my God, look how much you've done. But what you don't see is how long of a horizon that is. And if we look at ourselves, we're like, oh, I didn't do anything this week. But if you're thinking only in that short term versus like, I'm going to spend the next year on this project, 1 week is nothing. So you didn't get much done this week. That's okay. Right. But are you on track to accomplish that over a longer period of time?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And then it goes back to the idea of practice. like something that's consistent that I keep returning to? And how big a task have I set for myself? Do I need to chunk it down? Am I asking too much of myself? Can I reevaluate it? And just, see, is there some moment where I have a little sense of, oh yeah, my productivity is actually improving and my success is better, not where I want it to be. And where I've seen this happen many times, excuse me, with musicians, is that they want to get to a certain place and they get there, but now they're not satisfied because they want to see the next place. Which the carrot, that stick on the carrot on the stick is still moving further and further away, which can be a good incentive. But if it prevents you from acting, like I worked with one concert pianist who stopped playing because he wasn't where he wanted to be, and we worked for some months together, and we were past where he wanted to be, but now he wanted to be this way before he'd go back to the concert circuit. And I went, you're deluding yourself, right? That's not what you agreed to with yourself. Make a promise to yourself and keep it. You've gone way past where you first thought you would get to, and now it's still not enough. So we're dealing with a whole different thing. We're not dealing with his ability to play the piano. We're dealing with someone who just makes themselves suffer, So
it reminds me of a concept that I think about from your book is using kindness as a performance enhancer.
Say, because I didn't write it quite like that. Tell me what
using kindness as a performance enhancer. So like implementing kindness in a professional setting, that could lead you to, better performance, better productivity, and things with you and your colleagues. Could you unpack that a little bit more? I mean,
sure.
We can continue on that.
So I think that kindness generates more kindness. And if we're looking at an environment of performance, whether it's a business, right, or a family situation or something, or that anything that perpetuates a value that helps us feel better in some way is both useful and important. And I was just talking to another group about leadership and stuff like that. And it's like the leaders are the people who have to like themselves, right? But I think the leader is the person who has to help others like themselves.
Oh, yeah.
That's what perpetuates it. That's where kindness, I kind of hesitated when you use the word performance, because I don't think of kindness as a performance. I think of it as an action that leads to other actions, right? So there's no inherent reward from it. But here's the reward, okay? So maybe this will speak to a little bit. I'm not sure. The idea of liking ourselves more. So that's an intrapersonal process as I look at it. That we're moving in a way that we like the way it feels. It builds up. It generates a wealth of that until one day I go, I like myself a little bit more. And it came through these actions that I've been doing. And then one day I did something. I can never remember what it was. It was some small act of kindness. And in the next moment, I thought, I like myself more for doing that. And then I thought, that finished the loop from intrapersonal to interpersonal, that an act of kindness is something that can help me like myself more. And I'm certainly not suggesting I just do acts of kindness to pat myself on the back about that, but to be able to go, that's a perpetuating loop of positivity that keeps feeding back in on itself and around itself. And again, it doesn't mean that there aren't gaps or places where I don't want to do that. We're going to run into that over and over again. But that the more I do it, the better I feel. The kinder I am, the more I like myself. The more I like myself, the kinder I can be to others. And again, when I say being kind to others, I'm including tough love.
Right.
It's not like, I'm just Mr. Nice Guy all the time. It's like being able to say no to someone and to do that. So I think kindness is, I think it's a good drug. If we're going to be addicted to something,
sure,
I think that's a good one.
Can we go deeper on tough love?
Yeah. So tough love is tricky because what happens is I'm making a determination about what's good or right for someone. Like the friend
Ah,
over who wants a drink, and you say, no, I'm not going to give you a drink.
mm,
I may join you and not drink, right? So that, I mean, that would be a good accompaniment for something like that. Um, Tough love is the ability to clearly say no in a kind way, right? And they know it's in, whether I'm right or wrong, it's in your best interest that I'm saying no, right? And I had a student come up to me once with this idea in one of my trainings, and she had this great idea. What do you think? And I said, no. What do you mean, no? I thought you were all flexible, allowing change and choice. And I went, I am, but I know when to say no too. But then I explained to her why I said no and all the possible repercussions of what could happen if we did this. And she went, oh, I didn't think of any of that. And I said, that's my job.
right.
And the tough love is, let me see if I can find this. I'm going to read you something else. Where is it? I don't think I can find it, but I can paraphrase it.
Sure.
So my mother died when I was young, and she was a painter.
Mm.
And we were shocked to find out that she had destroyed almost all of her artworks. There wasn't much left. But in her art bag was a letter she wrote. I think I was 10, my brother was 8, something like that.
Mhm.
And in it, she talked about art and beauty, and she talked about truth and honesty. And she said, I don't know if it's good to tell someone the truth,
Mm,
but especially if it's going to hurt them.
mhm.
But if it's going to hurt you more not to tell the truth, then you need to say something. So that's kind of a real tough love kind of thing. Like, when do I decide to say something? And the thing about even the word truth makes me a little like, I don't like using that word. It's a little too absolute, and who knows, and different truth and all that. But the tough love can be akin to some kind of feedback to someone, but many people take feedback as criticism.
Mhm.
So how do we provide tough love, let's say in terms of feedback, in a way that supports the person in the direction they're going in, not tearing them down, right? But giving them more the means of what to do. So another story in the book is in one of my programs, there was a woman making up time from another training. She was there for a month. Then she came back for another month. Then she came back a third time. I said, how much time are you making up here? And she should have just transferred. But this last month was the final month she had to do to graduate. And from my point of view, she was not ready.
Mm,
And the educational director of the other program had never contacted me. And that's not my job. I just stay out of it. And so I wasn't going to say anything. And then I just thought, nah, I'm going to talk with her. So we announced her qualifications now and everything. I said, can we have a coffee later? And she said, you're going to drop a bomb on me? I said, no. I said, but I think we're going to have an awkward conversation. And we sat down and I said, look, I'm really glad you fulfilled all of the requirements that I had to do, but I thought it's better that someone is honest with you. And so from my point of view, you're not ready to graduate. Now, I'm not saying you can't graduate. I'm not going to stop it. It's not my job. She said, it is your job. I said, no, that's his job. He didn't contact me. And even if it was my job, if this was the agreement, I'm not going to fight it. But I think it's important that you get an honest opinion so that you don't then go out and try to practice and feel like you don't know enough. So, and she was quite annoyed with me. And I just patiently sat there and said, I understand your feelings, and I would probably feel the same way myself. And I said to her, look, wouldn't it be better if you were given honest feedback about where you are right now in terms of where you want to be? And I said, here's what I recommend. I recommend for another year or two, you attend other trainings and see what you learn. And she ended up coming to one of my other trainings in another city. And she said that was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten. To be able to have someone from a clear perspective, knowledgeable, who understood the whole process and stuff, to tell something. But that was not easy to do. Certainly wasn't easy for her, but I'll tell you, it was not easy for me, because it would be much easier to just go, I don't know if I'm going to see her again, right?
Right.
But, it's kind of like, where do we take the responsibility to help someone? And now here's the really tricky part, is those kind of conversations, they are really awkward, and we're all unskilled at it. And the only way we get skilled is by doing them again and again and again, and making lots of mistakes and going, oh, I did it again. Okay. But maybe next time I'll be a little better. Maybe if it's just prefacing it by saying, it's an awkward conversation, and I'm doing my best, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to apologize at the beginning, right?
Right.
Because then I'm kind of settling them, I'm kind of warning them too in a little bit, but at the same time, I'm leaving some doors and windows open for us both to escape, so we don't end up going head to head with something like that. So tough love is important, and it's tough love. We can simplify it, just the ability to say no. So many people I know can't say no.
Right.
They don't know, at their own expense. So that was my mother's thing. If it's going to hurt you not to do it, you have to do it. But how many people at their own expense don't say something, and then it's like another story that they carry with themselves about what they should have done and I didn't do, and blah, 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 stuff like that. So tough love is tough. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't start carrying those expectations of those things too, right? I should be doing these things or whatever. How with tough love, with honest feedback, so when I give honest feedback, what I try to do is I try not to use the word why, because that feels accusatory to somebody.
Right.
When you're, from your experience, with honest feedback, how do you make it not feel like criticism? Has there something you've learned?
Yeah.
That helps?
Something I'm still learning, I would say.
Sure.
Okay. So the first thing might be for someone to say, I'd like to talk to you about something. Are you open to feedback? And some people say no, and that's the conversation right there.
Okay.
It's like, I'm not going to keep pushing that if they don't want to hear it. I had one colleague I went to give feedback to, and I said, can I give you some feedback? And with the expectation that they would go, yeah. And they just like snapped at me and said, I don't want to be evaluated. And I went, okay. And like 3 days later, they told me exactly how I could have said what I said. Okay, that helps a little bit. But it's so first, we don't just dump it on someone. We ask them, is this something that's important to you? Is it worthwhile? And if it is, I say, okay, but then as I talk, if it's getting hard for you, stop me.
Okay, yeah.
An
out.
There's an out. There's always an out, and that out is something that it's important. Again, it's setting some ground rules for something. I gave feedback to someone who got very upset and thought I was talking to this person just to them in that way, and I didn't do it with anyone else, and there was nothing positive in what I said, which I afterwards checked other people who were listening and said, is that true? No. Okay, so this is this person's experience. That's fine. And then I tried to bring about a resolution, but the person was very upset with me still. And I'm in this hierarchical position and stuff, and it was tricky. I said all I could do is give them the opening and say, well, if you do feel like having a conversation, I'm here. Okay. And some days later they did. And they asked me if I was open to feedback. I said, I am. And I said, okay, so we scheduled another meeting, and this person had a list of 15 things. And
wow.
it was a little shocking to begin with, but I went, okay, we'll see what I'm doing that I don't know that I'm doing. Right. So that's how I can learn. And the conversation started. By the time we got to the third thing of feedback, I stopped them and I said, "Stop." I said, "I'm having a hard time hearing this." I said, "Because to my mind, this isn't feedback. This is all correction about how I should teach."
Mm.
And all of these things, if you started it by saying, "For me, when you do this and that, okay, then I can hear this. This is your experience. But you're telling me black and white, you need to change this." And I'm like, I don't know what you expect, but I've been doing this for a long time. And if I have, doing it your way, the way that you're saying, then yeah, I should be a big failure by now, but I'm not. So it's kind of like, let's rework this. And we had a few conversations after that, but it took time and patience to find a way that served both of us. Because feedback is a mutual thing, right? It's not just me telling someone something about themselves or pointing them in a direction. It's me checking in and going, is this useful? Did I say this in a way that you were able to hear it, right? Could I have changed anything? So they feel that I'm learning something too, and I'm not just the authority telling them how something should be, you know? So feedback, tough love, it's all tough love stuff. Yeah.
Right. What about using kindness in conflict? How can
Yeah.
how can we work?
So there's a body of work that I became interested in. It's called nonviolent communication. It's developed by a man named Marshall Rosenberg. He's no longer with us. And I had a friend who was always sending me articles and stuff about it. She was a colleague too. And I was like, I'm not interested in this. Leave me alone. And then I had a student give me a videotape of this guy. So now I felt like I had to watch it. And I just sat there mortified, going, oh my God, I do that. Oh my God, I do that. I do that too. And this guy would go around the world doing conflict resolution with warring tribes in different countries and stuff. I mean, he was like a serious mediator for stuff like that. And one of it's a very simple process. And the first thing is to be able to make an accurate observation, something concrete of what's going on, not interpretation of an event or something like that, the actual event. And then from there, looking at what's the feeling underneath it. Because if I look at just the event, we get stuck in the content,
Mm.
and which is that's the place we usually respond to. But if I can kind of wonder about or observe what someone might be feeling and meet them there, it settles the whole thing. And I have to say that since I've studied that work and practiced it, there's only been maybe 3 times where there was a conflict that I couldn't resolve. And that conflict I couldn't resolve were people who shouldn't have been in the programs, right? They were not ready to do this. And they either left on their own or were asked to leave or something like that. But I can give you an example, like one woman in one of my programs in the 4th year, she was like, and she was a physical therapist, and she was like, why are we doing this anyway? And I'm like, you've been here 4 years. What have you been thinking? I mean, I could have easily done that, right? And gone, you know the answer. Oh, you've been here 4 years, and just smacked her down again or something, right? And I said, well, are you? So I went to the feeling. I didn't go to like, what are we doing here? I said, are you scared that you won't be able to do this, or worried, or afraid? No, I'm not those things. Okay, well, I'm asking the question mostly because I think I hear that in your tone of voice. No, I'm not scared. I just want to understand what we're doing here. And I said, okay. So that already is what's the word?
Deflecting?
No, not deflecting. No, the opposite. It's kind of diffusing the power of the kind of way she came at me. It's like saying, I'm here to listen to you. I want to know what you're feeling. And we talked for a little bit, and by the end, she quieted down. She felt she since she couldn't really articulate what her need was that needed to be fulfilled, I couldn't answer her question, right? But I did respond to her feelings. And I'll tell you, every conflict I get into, if I move away from the content of what we're talking about to like, and I don't have to ask those questions. I can just respond to the person as if I've asked those questions. That's enough. That kind of flattens out the conflict. It sets a new ground for a conversation that wasn't possible 5 minutes ago. So I would say that. Yeah.
Excellent. So if people want to go deeper on these topics, we have your book, Practicing Intentional Acts of Kindness and Like Yourself More. I'll link to the website and the book for you guys. There's also a worksheet there as well. You guys download. We have the Uncommon Sensing, the
Feldenkrais.
Feldenkrais. Oh, I keep practicing it. I can't. We have that. I'll link to that. I'll link to all your social medias and everything. Is there anything else we want to point people to if they want to dig deeper down into this? Get a hold of you, get in contact with your teachings.
I think those places are fine, and you can always reach me through the websites if you have any questions about anything. And if you don't hear back from me in 3 days, I didn't get it because I'm fast in responding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. On the Social Community Show, I like to do a weekly challenge, and it could be anything we talked about or something we didn't at all. And I would like you to issue the challenge to the listeners for this week.
Okay. So I would say your challenge this week. Let's see. I'm not 3-4 things are running through my head. So I'm going to say that this week your challenge is to find, not all the time, but a number of moments throughout the day that you move in a way that you like the way it feels. It could be just getting up from your desk and going to the bathroom, or just walking from one room, just to connect with yourself like that, and looking at the quality of how you feel sensorially, and seeing if you practice that a number of times a day for a week, does it shift something in terms of how you listen to yourself, how you feel about yourself, and maybe even notice if that quality starts to reflect back to those around you as well.
That's beautiful. I love getting into the body and listening to ourselves. I think we definitely stray away from that from time to time.
Yeah.
Alan, man, so many notes, so many great ideas.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much. Deserving pain. Ooh, that's still wow, man. I gotta put more into that. This was absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate sharing all of your knowledge. Thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope everybody can take away some great nuggets from this interview.
And thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Perfect. You're absolutely welcome. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed Alan as much as I did. That was amazing. I got a ton of notes here. I hope you guys did too. I'm still deserving pain. Ooh, that one is still kind of got me there. Being patient and all these things you talked about. Great stuff. If you want to do something kind for somebody share this episode. Connect with us all week long on all the different platforms. If you'd like, all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you guys know where they all are. YouTube, you can watch this episode or your favorite podcast app. For past episodes and links to everything we talk about, have it to socialcommunion.show. Let's practice kindness, guys. That's amazing. But till next time, keep learning, growing, and transforming into the person you want to become.